What is up, everybody? Welcome back. It's been a few days. I've been gallivanting across the UK, down in London. Had a great few days. Good to see everybody here in the chat. Thank you for being here. Let's see who's here. Lara, UFO Garage, what's up? Daniel Miller, good to see you. The Signal. Man, so many people. Nigel, Dope Nose, Joss, Laura, my brother, Disclosure Bro, Arlene, Witness Citizen, Lord Ludicrous Plaid, and Ben. Thank you so much, guys, for being here. Let's not waste any more time. I would like to bring in my guest, the one, the only, Mr. Rather B. Squidding. Hey, Rather.
Hey, Vinnie. Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It's my pleasure, man. How are you doing today?
Doing well. I've been living vicariously through you and your photos from your amazing weekend this last couple of days, but I'm doing well.
Good, man. Yeah. It was a blast. But listen, man, we're here to talk to you, man. Like, I've been wanting to speak to you for quite some time. We've crossed paths a couple of times, you know, on Sean's channel and that. But yeah, I'm really interested to get into all about you tonight. So let's kick it off quite simply with what got you interested in UFOs, man.
Yeah, I mean, I was interested in UFOs. I mean, kind of as long as I can remember, right? I've always been fascinated in the sci-fi and the weird. It's been mostly kind of I treated it as entertainment mostly for most of my life. You know, I've watched X-Files, all the fun movies and stuff about the paranormal. You know, it really wasn't until 2017 with, I think, a similar story to a lot of people where I saw that New York Times article and suddenly the entertaining weirdness became real. And I've been, digging into, the stuff that I might have considered a little bit too out there before and realizing that some of it might be true. All of it might be true. So, I've been digging in more and more. And, about a year and a half ago now, during the whole quarantine time, I found a lot of stuff that I didn't get a lot of traction in the, channels and the stuff that I was following. So I kind of felt the need to, put those ideas out there myself and see where they fell.
That's incredible. And you're right. I think a lot of people really did. It changed their view on the subject when December 2017 came along. So what were your first initial thoughts when you saw things like the Tic Tac video and Go Fast and Gimbal? Was it, I mean, as good for you as it was for me?
Yeah, I mean, I was more amazed by like the actual written stuff in the story, right? Like those videos, you look at them alone and it's hard to know what's going on there, right? But then when you read the associated stuff with them and you read that they're talking about, storing captured craft and stuff like that in the New York Times, and it's it's almost unbelievable, right? But then you see that it's coming from reputable, Pulitzer Prize winning journalists, and yeah. So no, it was as big as I think it was probably as big for me as it was for you. It was pretty groundbreaking.
Awesome. Now I'm just checking the chat out, and I think there seems to be a big question that everyone wants to really know is where did the name come from?
It's a honest statement about what I usually feel, because I would rather be squidding a lot of the time. Squidding is a phenomenally fun activity. You go down to the docks of the Puget Sound here, which is a nice kind of quiet body of water attached to the ocean, and you go at night, and people shine giant lights into the ocean, and so you can see. Sometimes you'll see squid and octopuses and sea lions and stuff like that illuminated in the darkness below, and you're waiting for the schools of squid to come, and then you just kind of pluck them out of the water and fry them up the next day for calamari. And so it's a great fun activity.
That sounds amazing, man. Like every aspect of it, from being out on the water, seeing everything under the water, to then the end of the day when you're cooking it up, man. That sounds incredible.
I know, it's win-win.
Definitely, man. That's awesome. So thank you for clarifying that. I hope everyone is content with that answer. So listen, have you ever had a sighting or anything anomalous, in the sky that you haven't been able to explain?
Nothing. No, unfortunately not. I maybe fortunately not, actually.
No, it's the same as me, man. I'm in the same boat. So Yeah, it's one of them. Let's talk about UCR, because obviously you're a regular co-host on UCR. It's a big show now. It's followed by a lot of people. How did your involvement come about?
Yeah, I learned about UCR from the Big Phone Home, the first event they threw, and that really kind of introduced me to a lot of UFO Twitter and a lot of YouTube channels, and after that I tuned into Lou's show, and yeah, I heard them bad mouthing Mick West, and I called in a couple times to defend my man Mick's honor, which might get some mixed reactions in the chat, but called in a couple times, and kind of jived pretty well with them, and they asked me to come on and be a little bit more involved, and it kind of snowballed from there. Now I find myself there 3 times a week at least, and enjoying the wonderful conversations that happen there. I think it's a real fun thing to be a part of.
Yeah, excellent. And you mentioned Mick West. Now, I'm a firm believer in skeptics are accepted in this community, and I know Mick West gets a bad rap, but obviously from a lot of people. I've spoken to Mick on this channel. I like to hear every angle. I don't want to just sit in a narrow chamber, an echo chamber, or and not get every aspect of it. So, how do you feel about him? Do you feel like he is acceptable? Do you think he goes too far sometimes, or do you think he asks the right questions?
Yeah, I think he's a integral part of whatever this community is, because I don't necessarily agree with him on everything, but
Sure.
I think that his perspective is a perspective that we're going to have to address at some point if we want this issue to be accepted in the mainstream. And him asking questions doesn't change the truth, right? Like, if he's telling you the wrong thing, that doesn't change what is actually happening there. But they are questions that you have to consider. And it's, yeah, I mean, you got to consider them, and I think that he's probably right about a lot of things. And that's part of the challenge of this whole thing, is that we have no idea. We really don't have any idea if UFOs really exist, but I kind of presume that they do. And if you do
Sure.
presume that they do, we have no idea how common they are or what the likelihood for us actually being able to see it is. So yeah, Mick West could be correct about everything, and he could still be wrong about there being aliens and UFOs in our atmosphere.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that answer. And yeah, I think we do need skeptics. I think it makes the other side of the coin people work harder. It brings a balance to the subject. I do believe sometimes personally that Mick does kind of tend to go too far over the edge, but it is what it is. So yeah. So you mentioned that I'm just looking at my questions here. One thing I wanted to ask you is, when it came to starting your own channel, did you have a kind of direction that you wanted to go in? Was it trying to be a different type of channel to all the other ones out there? Because you do focus a lot, very scientifically based. I mean, that's one thing I absolutely love about your channel. And is that a background you have, or is that just pure research?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I kind of fell into that kind of science niche there. The science aspect really interests me, and it's really interested me as I look on Reddit and the science Reddits and the recent developments. And there's a lot of developments that seem like they could very well relate to the UFO issue, but people aren't really connecting those dots. So that's one of the most, I really find it interesting and engaging to kind of try to connect those dots. When I first started my channel, I was just trying to kind of raise awareness to the whole issue of UAPs and everything. Like, it was, middle of quarantine, about, summer of 2020. And I mean, even now I feel this way, this is groundbreaking news by the New York Times in 2017 and throughout. And still, I go and talk to my friends in real life, and no one is aware of it at all, right? So
yeah,
I was just trying to cover the New York Times topics and some of those the videos and stuff in the beginning, and offer my perspective on that. And then it kind of started. There's not a lot to go on there, right? Because the information kind of stopped. So I was trying to figure out what else could I add to the conversation, and that kind of science niche is something I kind of fell into.
Absolutely. Sure. And I've been back through your channel the last couple of days, just looking into it. And it's great how you break down all the different New York Times bits and pieces over a period of time, but then within those you really delve deep into other aspects. And I've got a little list and I'd like to talk about each one specifically. First of
Awesome.
all, I think one of your early videos was based around metamaterials and I think alien alloys. So what did you find? How did you come away from looking into that part of the subject after you'd done a bit of digging?
Yeah, so that was, the original 2017 article. They mentioned these recovered materials and metamaterials, and then they just kind of dropped that. There was no follow-up at all. But if you did kind of dig into the background of that, you found these kind of the history of the To the Stars Academy finding these pieces that were presumably connected to Roswell. I think there's some connection through Linda Moulton Howe, I believe,
Yeah.
and all that. But they, if you looked into the background of it, you found that they do have this piece of metal that has a weird layered structure to it. So it's layered with bismuth and then magnesium, and you look at it and it's like, what? This is just a hunk of metal, right? And there's been people who have claimed that, oh, this just looks like metallic slag from an industrial process. But then you have a paper from Hal Puthoff, which actually it might not be from Hal Puthoff, but he found a paper, or he cited this paper where it talks about, hey, if you had a material that had these layers of specifically bismuth and magnesium, it would potentially act as a metamaterial, which would act like a waveguide to terahertz waves, which is essentially kind of saying that there's this is a little bit above my head too, but it's essentially saying that you could manipulate and guide these terahertz waves with a material like they found here. And so that's just kind of blew my mind, right? Is that we have this hunk of metal that looks kind of crazy, and someone has this vague connection to Roswell, which seems all very dubious to me. But then when you add, hey, there is something kind of special and strange about this material, the questions come leaping out, right? Like, what is going on there? Is this a material from a craft?
Absolutely.
Maybe. Yeah.
And that conversation is still ongoing. We're still waiting to hear about some of the information that was initially teased to us a few years ago. So yeah, I think it's still, the jury's out on what they've got, whether it be in the hands of the government, the military, private aerospace, corporations or whatever. Do you think, based on what you've seen, heard, and who you've spoken to through UCR, what are your thoughts on crash retrievals as far as what's in the hands of, say, the government, military, or private aerospace?
Yeah, so I'm on mixed minds here. I am, like, you've mentioned that the metamaterial hunk there.
Yeah.
I'm not totally convinced that is metamaterial. I think that's very interesting, and like a that link to the science paper about bismuth and magnesium is very interesting. But it still seems very weird to me how you would get a crashed UFO and get like a hunk of metal like that kind of detached from a larger craft. And then when you talk about actual whole craft and stuff like that, it brings to mind the questions that everyone has is if they are able to get here from wherever they were started from, are they really going to crash here on Earth? Like, is that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But no. I would love to be proven wrong. Kind of my own pet theory is, you talk about the metamaterial that was recovered, and there's other pieces of artifacts that were recovered by UFOs, and it seems to me that you have the skeptics who look at these materials and say, hey, this just looks like a piece of molten metal, some like industrial slag that could be created in a metal foundry. Sure. And then you have the believers who say, hey, no, this is actually a metamaterial. Look at the layering. Or they'll look at other objects and say, well, we just have to study it and find out what is really going on there. There's got to be some nano technology going in on these inner works. My hunch is that it might be something. They might both be wrong, right?
Sure.
My hypothesis is alien poop. That these things are up in the air. They're not really engaging with us, but they're monitoring what's going on Earth, and they're potentially replicating. Right, the von Neumann probe theory, where you have a self-replicating space robot that goes to one planet and monitors it while making copies of itself and sending it to other places.
Fascinating. So, wow.
Yeah, so the von Neumann probe. So if you had something like this and you were able to make these self-replicating space probes go at 20% of the speed of light, you could populate the entire galaxy in, a couple millions of years, which is a blink of the eye in astronomical time frames.
Sure.
So if that's possible, they're probably here. And if they're here, I think that what they're probably doing is, monitoring us and collecting resources around Earth. And if they're making copies of themselves, they'd have to be refining those resources somehow. And I think they're probably pooping out the liquid metal waste as liquid metal. And that's what people see. That's probably what I think happened at Roswell, is that maybe they found some things on the radar and they're, what is that? And then they see, oh, there's a bunch of droplets coming from it. It must have crashed. Let's go see what happened. And they find a bunch of metal weird droplets on the ground. And they pick them up and they go off to top secret science research facilities, and they've been studying alien poop for the last 70 years in secret.
Love it. I mean, the way you explain it, it makes sense, and that's why I really find your work and your videos so fascinating, because you lay it out in a way that is it has that scientific sort of analysis of it, but it also makes sense to people like me who aren't really science based. I'm just going to bring up a couple of comments here. Aaron Desario, does anyone else notice the coincidence that bismuth is the same column on the periodic table as element 115? I mean, that's certainly interesting, and I didn't know that. So
yeah, I didn't make that connection either. That is very interesting. The columns on the periodic table all have similar, properties.
Yeah,
so that is interesting.
Good to see Aaron here as well. Greg says, rather be squidding. Thoughts on Lazar S4? Well, we've already touched upon crash retrievals. So, yeah, give us your thoughts on Bob Lazar and S4 and that whole story.
Yeah, a lot of these stories, like Lazar's, my kind of default position is that there's probably some kernel of truth, but there's probably a lot of myth truths as well.
Sure.
So, I think that there's a lot of problems with Lazar's story. We talk about his education, and there's a lot of holes in his stories, right? But there's undeniably he kind of got some things right? Like he was able to take his friends out to see stuff in the sky. Who knows what that is? And there's some things that are hard to explain by just coincidentally being true. My own kind of hunch is that maybe he was working as a contractor at Los Alamos or something. I think there's some theories they found him in a phone book and they can tie him to like a contracting job.
Yeah.
My guess is that maybe he was in that vicinity of people, and maybe there was a real whistleblower that fed Lazar information, and then Lazar kind of took that to be his own story and embellished it. But I don't really know what happened, but that kind of makes the most sense to me.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. I think it gets to that point in the Lazar story where we have to speculate, and we may never know the answers. I think if you look at it from a positive perspective, Bob Lazar story brought the UFO subject to a broader audience back in the 90s, in the early 90s. So that's a good thing in my book. But I think we could argue this till we're all, in nursing homes at the end of our lives. It could be one of them. But yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. Do you think Lazar will give a deathbed confession either way?
Oh, no, that is yeah.
Hopefully that's a long ways off, but I would.
Hopefully it's confirming that it's all true still, and not that he does a turnaround and says, "Yeah, I was just playing you all." That would be awful, man.
That would cause some heartbreak.
Yeah, big time, man. Now another video that I really enjoyed, but I'm not going to lie, it went a bit over my head, was quasi crystals.
Yeah.
Can you break it down for the average Joe like myself, because it all looked good, sounded good, made the connections and stuff, but it was still like, what did I just watch in here? Because that was, wow.
Yeah. No, that was one of my first couple videos. So I was alluded to or found out about quasi crystals from Jeremy Riss's channel, Alien Scientist.
Right.
And he was friends with this guy Ed Fouché,
Right. Yeah.
back in the like 90s or something. He was kind of like a Bob Lazar type figure, had
Yeah.
claimed to work at these secret facilities. And he, just Ed Fouché and his talks is what kind of clued me into first what metamaterials actually are, that they're not just some weird name that the New York Times made up. And then, he mentioned quasi crystals, that, there was these quasi crystals technology in these craft. And gosh, it's a hard thing to explain, and I tried to wrap my head around it again. A lot of these topics, like I got to read a bunch of stuff, and it will make sense to me for about 30 minutes, and then I need to reread stuff to actually have it aligned in my brain again. But it's essentially some way of like having a crystalline structure that isn't actually repeating. So like most crystalline structure is like, here's a crystal, here's a crystal, here's a crystal. They're all in a nice solid grid. A quasi crystal is a way to kind of, it's repeating, but it's not in any defined pattern necessarily. So there's like a Penrose tiling is like a 2D example, and it's common in like a lot of different motifs of building and stuff like that, where it's these cool patterns that aren't really patterns, but they kind of are. And it's a bad explanation for me, but
wait, you say Penrose? Is that like Roger Penrose? Is it?
Yeah.
Right,
So Roger Penrose tile is like a weird mathematical kind of conundrum for like having symmetry between things that shouldn't have symmetry. So like there's normally you can't have like a pentagram, like you can't tile a pentagram, right? Because there's only some shapes that you can tile.
Yeah.
But you can tile a pentagon in this quasi-crystal type fashion. So it still has five-fold symmetry, but it's not just a same object repeating. It's like you got to kind of splice in these other little filler kind of things. Right. But if you do this in a 3D crystalline structure, then what you end up with is something that's incredibly strong and like resistant to, it has properties that just a normal crystal wouldn't have, that would be very useful for, things like spacecraft and, temperature resistant things. And kind of the angle that I found somewhat interesting is that it's kind of like pi, these quasi crystals, and where it's like a non-repeating structure, right? So like my kind of out there hypothesis, I like to kind of, take these ideas and then draw one layer beyond that. Might be a little bit out there, but the out there idea here is that if you have this non-repeating crystalline structure, you could potentially encode information into it. You could, structure it in such a way that you're kind of like the digits of pi, you're encoding these different, information inside of those gaps of the five-fold symmetry. And if you did that by the nature of quasi-crystals, it would be a incredibly tough crystalline structure. It would, last for a long time. You could potentially encode some information into a quasi-crystal and shoot it across the galaxy in hopes that it would eventually hit down on someplace like Earth. And that's where we found them. That's the only natural quasi-crystals we found on Earth were from meteorite fragments. And there's a whole history of like the search for these quasi crystals, and there's a really interesting book, I can't remember off the top of my mind, but it documents the quest for these natural quasi crystals. But it's it's exciting. It's a cool thing.
That's exactly what I wanted to hear from you, man. You broke it down to a point where it was interesting but also really exciting. Daniel Shaw Miller here rather needs a science show on Netflix. I would watch that, man. Absolutely.
Call me up, Netflix.
Couldn't agree more, man. Now the next one, that's something that I've been thinking about for some time over the past few years, is gravity waves. Something that's quite new as far as the discovery, but the potential of what could be done with it as far as relating it to UAP, whether it be tracking or things like that. Now, what is your take on that when you looked into it?
Yeah, so that is incredibly interesting. I think, gravity waves are, in the last 10 years, we've been able to detect them. And it's essentially like, you look out into the sky, and, we're currently using our eyes, our telescopes, to see the visual information of like the stars and visually see what's out there. Looking at gravity waves, they're very analogous to sound waves. They're like compressional waves that move through space and they go through everything. So now that we can start essentially hearing what's going on in space, it's like a completely new sense that we can explore our universe with.
Right.
And currently our ears are pretty limited, our gravity ears. Like all we can hear are the very loudest sounds out there in the cosmos. And that's, when the black holes circle around each other and merge, that creates these giant gravity ripples that are, we can detect them millions and millions of light years away. So that's what we're currently detecting. And that's alone is really cool because we're making a kind of an audio map of these events that are going around in our universe. But as it pertains to UAP and aliens, first of all, there's the thought that you might be able to detect Alcubierre drives with this, right? Like things that are manipulating gravity here on Earth.
Yep.
And that might be possible. I don't think that we currently have the technology to detect something like that.
Right.
Because those would have, like it would be turning on and off at, it would look just like random noise to us,
Okay.
which there is a lot of random noise that goes on in these, LIGO and LISA, these detectors of gravity waves. So maybe we are seeing those, but we just can't totally know for sure. But what we might
Yeah.
start to detect maybe relatively soon even is messages from other civilizations far, far away from us. There's a lot of people who think that gravity wave communication would be a lot better than communicating via radio or any electromagnetic signals, because electromagnetic signals get warped and lost in dust, and they can be obfuscated by a planet or something in front of it. Gravity waves are just going to go right on through, and they also go further than light.
Yeah.
Something
So
about
maybe.
yeah.
So I was just going to say, sorry, maybe because it's such a new thing that we've discovered, like 5 years, pretty much. Maybe they're working on the technology that they think that, yeah, we've tried the radio wave thing, with SETI and that for so many years. Maybe they are working on that, bringing that technology sort of to the forefront of looking out there to find these waves.
Yeah,
Maybe.
yeah, and the next advancement for this is going to be really cool. They're launching satellites into space that will be like connected via laser beams. So like currently our
Wow.
LIGO connectors are like, they're, I don't know how long, they're on the order of miles long. You
Wow.
put it into space, they're going to be hundreds of miles long. I don't know the scales. It might even be longer than that. And the longer you have, the longer the system is, or the bigger it is, the further out and the more things you can detect. So yeah, I think it's an area to watch in the next couple of years.
Definitely, man. Definitely fascinating. Just going to give a shout out to Mr. Ryan Sprague.
Love Ryan.
Ryan, it was a pleasure to meet you the other night. Congratulations again on your engagement, and I think you met Lou Elizondo today as well. So it's all happening for this guy right now. I love Ryan to bits, but don't neglect your family. Don't come and watch this and neglect your family. And enjoy your vacation if you're still out there, brother.
Yeah, was his fiance just alone at the bar when he was there at the group shots with you?
No, to be fair, we met Ryan at his hotel, and they were having like a nice little maybe some kind of afternoon tea. There were scones and little cakes and things. It was very sophisticated. It was Ryan, his fiance and family. I hope you don't mind me telling this story, Ryan. And then we just bowled into this hotel like lads. And kind of abducted him almost to take him to the pub for Guinness and Scotch whiskey. So no, it was fantastic, man. The guy is a legend.
I'm jealous of that, and congratulations, Ryan. Couldn't be happier for you.
Yeah, look, everyone's loving it. Oh, it was great. Now another one. I'm going to keep bringing these up rather because they really were so fascinating, but just slightly over my head was the time travel video that you did. But then you brought in this thing called Laplaces Demon, which stood out because it was something I'd not heard of before. So again, would you mind like talking us through it a little bit?
Yeah. So Laplace's Demon is a concept, like a philosophical concept by this guy called Laplace, which was essentially if you had if you knew all the laws of nature and you knew where everything was, you could essentially replay the past and the present, right? Like if everything is deterministic and you know the rules and you know where things are, you would literally know the future.
Right.
And it's possible that, and especially when you talk about like interdimensional beings, right? If there is something that can transcend our three dimensions in time space, that can, there's another dimension, and they view our reality like we view like books on a page, where they can flip through it and they could tell what's happened and then flip back to the previous page. That essentially is what an interdimensional being would view our reality as. It would kind of be like a 3D choose your own adventure book for them. Uh, and so if you had an entity like that, the Laplace Demon, they could interact with us, and it would seem like, it seemed like a god, or it seemed like, paranormal weird force. They could literally, if you had that ability, they could only interact with us humans when they knew for sure that there was no chance for that to actually be provable, right? So when you talk
Wow.
about like a
Okay.
trickster type entity,
Yeah.
you could see them, looking through the pages of all the possible outcomes of their interactions. And when they find, oh, right now no one else is looking, I can go scare this guy, and everyone's going to think he's crazy, but it might have some other ripple effects that they want. They could do that.
Wow.
On one hand, I love that theory, right? Because
Yeah.
it could explain everything. But on the
Sure.
other hand, I kind of hate the theory, because it's kind of throwing your hands up and saying, we'll never know, that we're subject to an interdimensional being that is just toying with us, and there's no way to ever prove it, which kind of sucks if that's true.
It does, but you know what? This is just another example. You looked into the time travel theory. You're now looking at interdimensional, and you're asking the questions. It's good that you're not afraid to go there, which I think it really shows. But it shows that your knowledge of it, you definitely do the research, or you have a knack for it, because it goes way above my head. But I love
Yeah, no,
listening and watching.
I love staying up till 2, 3 a.m. just digging down those Reddit rabbit holes and finding all these weird links. And yeah, no, I think that's where the fun is in the whole UFO community, is digging down to these theories and seeing how they might make some sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do time crystals fit in with time travel, or is it a separate thing?
Yeah, so those are separate concepts, actually.
Okay.
The time crystals has a very misleading name, because I do kind of imply time travel. But really, what a time crystal is just something that repeats in time. So, like we talked about quasi crystals and how crystals repeat in space because they have like
Yeah.
a repeatable structure. A time crystal is something that repeats in time. So, like if you had something like this that went this and just did that like all the time, that would be a time crystal because it would be repeating in space.
Wow.
And this is actually a new thing that was recently kind of discovered. They found that you could, it kind of implies, like if you saw something like that, it kind of implies perpetual motion, right? Because it is something
Like
that is moving
constant.
forever. Yeah,
Yeah.
constantly in motion. And that, you think of it physically, and we're always told that that can't happen. There's air resistance, there's friction, there's something that's going to cause that motion to eventually slow down and stop.
Right.
They found in the last, couple of years, they've been able to demonstrate something at the very lowest energy state. So it's just, like a collection of molecules, and they kind of jostle it, and then it starts, the quantum spin on it starts to spin one way and then alternate to spin the other way. So you have these molecules that are altering on a quantum level periodically, and they'll just keep on doing this forever.
Right.
And it's a really weird phenomenon. They're kind of haven't really found any practical applications for it yet, and it's kind of unclear exactly what the practical applications are. But it's most of the research is around using these for like quantum computing and kind of trying to isolate these quantum effects and being able to make kind of coherent quantum structures.
Right.
So yeah, I don't really know where the time crystals are going, but I think that's another interesting area to watch.
It
And
is,
that's
exactly.
and
Go
that's
on,
all
go on.
different than time travel, because time travel is kind of a inherent side effect of faster than light travel. So when you
Right.
talk about being able to warp space or make any possible faster than light drive, that by nature implies that you can time travel. And that's really weird. And this is one of those things that I definitely have to get straight in my mind before I attempt to explain it coherently. But there's these things called space-time diagrams. And kind of like a cool concept is that we're always going the speed of light in either the time axis or the space axis. So like so if you're going really fast in space, you're going really slow in time.
Okay.
And if you're going faster, and so your time and your space always have to add up to the speed of light.
Right.
And so this is where it gets weird. If you're going faster than the speed of light, that mathematically means that your time is negative because they have to add up to the speed of light.
Wow.
And so that just it's an argument for faster than light travel may be being impossible.
Right.
But then
okay.
you have people like Stephen Hawking's and other top level theoretical physicists who are doing papers about this stuff, who talk about being able to go back in time at the quantum level, and they have these principles that talk about how you might be able to go back in time, but maybe you wouldn't be able to change anything because that would create a piling on that would create like a spiral space-time bubble that would blow up the universe or something like that. So there's these cool there's the Novikov self-consistency principle, I think that is, but there's these principles that these theoretical scientists have made about the nature of time travel, so that they're not ruling it out, but they're kind of putting some parameters on it. So yeah,
Wow.
it's fascinating. Yeah,
it is absolutely fascinating, man, and I love the way that you explain it, because it does it I can see it in my head, like the way you're talking about it. It breaks it down to a level where I can kind of not necessarily understand it, but I can picture it.
Yeah, I don't think anyone could actually understand this stuff. It's pretty wild.
Now, I think my favorite video that you did was the one about ball lightning. That blew me away. It's not something I've really looked into, but I've started recently looking into things like the Hessdalen lights and things like that. So yeah, I don't know where you want to start with ball lightning. But yeah, break it down for us if you can.
Yeah, so there was the Condon report in the USA in like the 60s that kind of ended Project Blue Book, and kind of had the thing saying this is all atmospheric stuff, and there's no real aliens here. But in that report they did say that there are these atmospheric phenomenon that deserve to be further studied, and they call this ball lightning. And even before that, and I think in the 50s, they did preliminary report on ball lightning, which I dug up, which I thought was a kind of an interesting name when we have the current preliminary report on UAP. But that report, is from the 50s. It did a surveying of people at a nuclear facility, and like something like 3 to 5% had witnessed this ball lightning phenomenon, and it's very strange, right? And when I say ball lightning, I really don't even know what I mean. Like, a lot of people hear that and they assume that you're talking about natural atmospheric phenomenon, something like lightning, but it's just a ball and lasts for a couple seconds. But if you look at this preliminary report, they're suggesting that there might be fusion reactions going on in these ball lightning things, which still could be a natural phenomenon. But by my angle of it, where I see this going, is that maybe that's how the UAP, how extraterrestrial craft work, is that they're causing this ball, causing a fusion reaction. That's how they get their energy, and it looks like ball lightning to us. But there's papers on self-organizing plasma dust, and they could even be their own life forms, right? There could be plasma life that exists in the atmosphere. Maybe it is an ET, but there's just so many different possibilities, and it's I think it's very, very interesting. You talk about Hessdalen as well. There's clear examples of it going on, but it's still, it seems like we should know more about these ball lightnings in the Hessland areas and stuff,
Definitely,
but
man.
we
Yeah, I
don't. And
mean,
I find that interesting.
yeah, and like I said, it's something that I've only really recently touched upon. I think I'm going to be speaking to Erling Strand in a few weeks because I
Oh,
want to
cool.
learn. I want to learn more, man. But yeah, Dan the Signal, thank you, brother, for being here. I miss you, man. We spent a few good days together. But he says ball lightning
Awesome.
is fascinating. We understand so little about it, and it has so many similar qualities. But then goes on to
So true.
say, where was it? I missed it. I imagine they use the mechanism the UAP do. I mean, wow.
Yeah, yeah. And then
Great.
he mentioned the Martin Fisherman Memorial Project, which is a really cool project that's doing a lot of research in these areas of fusion reactions and ball lightning and a concept like
Wow.
code fusion. So I'd recommend everyone checking that out if they're interested in this topic.
I will certainly be popping that into my browser later. Thank you, Signal. Thank you, rather. So listen, that's kind of covered all your videos. Now, what I will say is to everybody in the chat right now, listening to this on YouTube later or on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you've got to go and check out Rather's channel because it is incredible, because it breaks down these scientific principles or conversations to a point where it's not as mind-numbing as he might think sometimes. Rather does a great job. Now let's jump back to a bit more of what's been happening recently. I think your latest video, which I watched earlier, is regarding skinwalkers at the Pentagon.
Yeah, that's a wild story, huh?
It is. I mean, it gives us some details about the relationship between ORSAP and ATIP. Still a little bit of things unclear for me personally. Then there's obviously some controversy with kind of high strangeness, let's say. What's your breakdown or take on it from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I found it really fascinating. The whole ATIP versus OSAP. I think that shed some light on there, which I thought was very, very interesting. When you get to the specifics of the stories there, it's like, wow, right? After I read or saw the 2017 New York Times story, one of the first things that I went into was George Knapp's Skinwalker Ranch book, and the stuff that went on there. And at the time I was like, wow, this is unbelievable, right? Like, and now we have this new book that kind of doubles down on all those really crazy tales about cryptids and irrational fear circles and stuff like that. And it, on one hand, you kind of want to read that and just say, this can't be right. This is like, it's a step above ET visiting us, because like I can have a scientific basis for, and I believe that we should be seeing ETs based on if you think that it's space travel is possible and we're not alone.
Sure. Yeah.
But something like the interdimensional Sasquatches, coming around, I don't really have any scientific framework that can build that into it. But then when I was reading this book, you hear about them talking about the people who have these experiences have immune system responses. Like they take their blood and it looks like they've, their immune system is fighting something. And then you also pair that with the hitchhiker effect, which they kind of double down on this book as well. People go to the ranch and then they go home and their family members start experiencing this weirdness.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they even talk about in the book treating or modeling the behavior on the ranch as an infectious agent. And they say, there's a lot of parallels between the hitchhiker effect and how a virus might be transmitted.
Definitely.
And so then, when I'm, racking my brain and trying to find a scientific potential explanation for all this weirdness that goes on there, thing that jumps right out at me is that, hey, maybe this is a literal infectious agent that is, maybe in the dirt, in the soil somewhere, in the food supply that people are inhaling and maybe hallucinating, maybe getting some fear, and when they come home they spread that virus that's causing that strange effects to other people.
Yeah, interesting.
That's like the only way I could really make sense of it. I don't know if it's true, but
it is hard to make sense of it. That's the thing when you get onto that aspect of the high strangeness in the book. It's all good talking about government compartments and agencies and groups, but then when you get into the ranch and the deep stuff, yeah. Ooh la la, we're talking immune systems. Can you ask Rather what he thinks about Nolan's work with Caudate Puterman? I assume he means Gary Nolan. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dan. I see Rather noting away there.
Yeah.
No, are you familiar with that?
I am not familiar with that at all. But Dan has awesome information, so I'm definitely taking a note to research that later.
So there you go. Dan. We will get back to you on that, Dan. No problem at all. Michael Huntington, that's a good point. Hitchhiker effect will remain voodoo until a mechanism is ascribed. Fantastic point. It is.
Well, I mean, that's a strange thing too, because voodoo has real physical effects on people, right? You talk about the placebo effect and how strange that is, and maybe that's what's going on there. It seems like a very, very powerful placebo effect if that's what's happening at the Skinwalker Ranch. But there might be an aspect of that going on too.
And I think a little bit that's frustrating is I think it seems that there's a lot of the research that was done on the ranch previously through Bass is still hidden away within Bass somewhere. It's outside of the realms of FOIA and things like that, and yet we don't get to see it. And it sounds like Bigelow's sitting on a hell of a lot of data and information, possibly.
Yeah, no, it is frustrating, right? Especially when our government paid for that research. We should be able to flip through it.
Yeah, exactly. Like get as many scientists as we can looking at it, because it baffles me. Here you go. Signal again. Bigelow should give it to us for Christmas. There you go, man.
It does seem like all this UFO news does seem to come out in December. Like the 2017 came out in December. I think there was a couple other drops there. Here's hoping.
Hey, man, I'll take that. I'll take it. Every year, something to look forward to. So finally, like a couple of or one of the last things I'd like to talk to you about is we've seen recently about the possibility of a UAP permanent office being set up. Well, at least for the next 4 years, maybe. Do you have much confidence in what you've seen when looking at, HR 4350 and 2610?
Yeah, I'm excited about that. I think that, I wish that those bills would have specified a public report versus just, kind of the confidential reports. But, you look back into the weird history of this issue and, the Skinwalker Ranch stuff and the OSAP. And I think, kind of regardless of whether you think that was a wild goose chase or had some merit to it, I think that undeniably there's a lot of good that came out of it, which was the UAP task force, which gave us that report, and now this UAP office, which it seems, from all available information that these are real, valid takes and people looking into these UAPs that are going into their skies. So, I applaud those efforts, and I think it's it's the most movement in the government for, since Blue Book, right? For 50, 60 years. I think it's amazing.
Certainly in the public eye. Yeah. I mean, for sure. I'm with you on that. Absolutely. So what, we know you from UCR and Singularity Lab and that, but have you got anything else planned for the near future or going forward? Any research that you're digging into right now?
Nothing really burning on my plate. I think I'm going to try to make a little video explaining some of those concepts of the Laplaces Demon a little bit more, and maybe relate it to Santa Claus, because I think that he might be a interdimensional entity. So
wow, it's a good time of year to get
we'll see if I can get that out in time for Christmas.
That is awesome, man. Well, listen, Rather, thank you so much for joining me, man. Before you leave, can you please tell everybody where they can find you?
Yeah, on Twitter, at @BSquidding, and YouTube, Rather Be Squidding. And thanks, Vinnie. It's always great talking to you.
Man, it was incredible. Honestly, I'm going to even go back and watch your channel videos again, because they are that good. I cannot stress enough to everybody out there that Rather comes from such a great angle that it's going to make you want more. It's going to make you dig more as well. So, yeah, Go
I
and treat
appreciate that,
yourself.
Vinny.
Go and subscribe to Rather. Follow him on Twitter and all that. But Rather, again, thank you so much, my friend. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you back on UCR in a couple of days.
Thanks.
Cool.
See you later.
Take care. Bye-bye now.
You too.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. I knew that was going to be a great discussion. I literally have so much time for the things that Rather talks about, whether it be on UCR in the Singularity Lab. But, again, I'm going to stress one final time that his channel is phenomenal. It's really good and interesting stuff, and it will lead you down some new rabbit holes that you might not have kind of, thought about before. So, yeah, guys, let's just go through the chat before I go, because I've been away for a while. It's been good to see so many people. I hope you've all had a good few days since I was last on. Yeah, Priscilla, Eve Clancy, NMUAP, Baz, Laura Sosa, Wilfred's here, Night Gazer, Michael Huntington, Joss, Dragonfly. Always good to see all of my friends. The Signal, Mr. Sean Rash, Byron, good to see you, man. Lord Ludicrous, Surf Psych, Daniel Miller, Millisecond Falcon, Night Gazer. You guys rock. Every single one of you. Greg, good to see you guys. How the F was the weekend? Man, the weekend was incredible. Like, I guess I'll address one. The weekend was good. We got so much done. We talked about so much. We discussed possibilities for the future, so if anything comes of it, you'll see it in the future. And I think that's all that I can really say about that. Plans take time. Ideas may come to fruition, they may not. Friendships that were already formed were just solidified and bonded. Dan, I'm sure the Signal will speak to that. It was incredible how well we got on, how much fun we had in each other's presence, the conversations that flowed. It showed us that whatever we do going forward as a group is going to be great, with so many good minds working together. We're a very positive thinking group when it comes to the UAP UFO subject, and all we want to do is do our best for the community. So we had so much support over the weekend as well. There we go. Here he is. Vinnie is officially family now. All the UAP media guys are just bloody fantastic, truly. It was. We really did. Living in a house with so many dudes for 3 days, you quickly become friends. But it's all love. It's nothing but love. So, yeah. Guys, I thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to be back here on YouTube. Let me just check my schedule. Bear with me. In this Thursday, same time as tonight, I'm going to be joined by Mr. Christopher Plain, head science writer for The Debrief. You may have seen him on UCR. I cannot wait. I'm trying to look at this subject from many more aspects. Science, like we spoke with, rather than about that kind of thing. So it's all a learning curve every single day. Look at it in a positive light. So, guys, thank you so much. I'm going to go and chill out. It's been a long few days. I love you guys to bits. Thank you for joining me. And I'll see you on the next one. Peace.